Welcome to Learning English. Prepare yourselves, because we're about to embark on an exciting adventure with this story. Let's begin. In 2025, the Dutch city of The Hague prepared to host a crucial gathering, the NATO Summit. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is an alliance of North American and European nations dedicated to collective safety and peace. For the very first time, The Hague welcomed leaders and ministers from all 32 NATO member states. An estimated 9,000 individuals were anticipated to attend this major summit. Among them were approximately 45 heads of state, including presidents, and prime ministers, along with their ministers of foreign affairs and defense. Due to the event's importance, the world closely watched the proceedings in the Netherlands. The Dutch government invested significant effort into ensuring the summit's success. Meticulous security arrangements were put in place, as the safety of the visiting dignitaries was the highest priority. They also handled the complex logistics required for such a large-scale international conference. By hosting the Netherlands, aimed to demonstrate its reliability as an ally and contribute to strengthening global peace and security. A big meeting, this significant summit convened during a period of global difficulty. The ongoing war in Ukraine placed security at the forefront of the agenda. Additionally, a new conflict had just erupted in the Middle East before the leaders gathered. These grave international events made the discussions at the summit especially critical and imbued them with a sense of tension. A major point of discussion revolved around the United States and its role. The American president was in attendance at what was his first NATO summit since beginning his second term in office. During his previous presidency, he had frequently expressed strong criticism of NATO. He argued that many member nations were not spending adequately on their own defense, and insisted they should contribute much more to the alliance's protection. Given the American president's history of criticizing the alliance and demanding increased spending, several other NATO nations were apprehensive. They held concerns about America's long-term dedication to NATO. A fundamental component of NATO is Article 5, a principle stating that an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. Every member pledges to help defend any ally under attack. Some allies questioned whether the United States would consistently uphold this vital rule in the years ahead. This uncertainty about American support and the future of Article 5 was a primary worry for many countries at the summit. The leaders knew they needed to address these concerns directly. The atmosphere of this meeting was distinct from previous summits due to these insecurities and the challenging global situation. All participants understood that the decisions made here could profoundly shape the alliance's future. Money problems, a central topic at the summit, was defense funding. NATO has an established guideline that each member nation should allocate at least 2% of its gross domestic product (GDP) to its military. This was the existing target. However, the U.S. president pushed for a higher figure, asking countries to commit 5% of their GDP. This represented a substantial increase. Many member countries did not favor this proposal. The leap from 2% to 5% was seen as very large. Spain was one nation that explicitly rejected the idea, with its government calling the 5% figure unreasonable. Other nations also felt it would be challenging to find the necessary additional funds. Getting all 32 countries to agree on this was a big challenge. NATO needs everyone to say yes for new rules. Different countries have different problems and different amounts of money. Some governments thought spending so much on the military would mean less money for things like schools or hospitals. The head of NATO, Secretary-General Rutte, worked diligently to mediate. He attempted to help the member countries reach an agreement, aiming to preserve the unity and strength of the alliance. He engaged in numerous discussions with leaders, seeking a way that everyone could accept. The idea of spending more money was difficult for many governments at home. People might not want their taxes to go up so much for the military. So the leaders had to think about what was good for NATO and what was possible for their own country. The money problem was central to the talks in The Hague. NATO's story in NATO, which stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is an alliance of nations committed to mutual safety. It was founded in 1949 with 12 original members from Europe and North America. They united out of concern over the Soviet Union during the period known as the Cold War. A core principle of NATO is collective defense. This concept, enshrined in the NATO Treaty as Article 5, means that if one member is attacked, All other members pledged to come to its aid. Article 5 has been invoked only once, following the September 11, 2001, attacks on the United States. NATO began with 12 members, but it has grown over the decades. Nations such as Greece, Turkey, Germany, and Spain joined in subsequent years. Following the end of the Cold War, numerous countries from Eastern Europe and beyond also became members. Today, NATO comprises 32 member states, with Sweden being the most recent to join in 2024, known as the world's largest military alliance for peace. NATO's work has changed over time. Initially focused on preventing a major war in Europe, its scope later expanded to include military operations in regions like the Balkans and Afghanistan. These missions were outside Europe, but its primary duty remains the protection of all member states from attack. The organization has a defined structure, led by a civilian secretary general and a top military commander. Yet NATO does not maintain its own army. Soldiers, planes, and ships come from the member countries. Each country gives its forces and equipment to help. The United States gives a very big part of the soldiers and money for NATO. NATO leaders now meet often to talk about important things. Some people think NATO was only for the Cold War, but many people believe NATO is still needed today. They say that new dangers, like attacks on computers or other kinds of threats, mean NATO is still very important to keep member countries safe together in a changing world. The major meeting in The Hague was about more than just defense funding. Leaders engaged in many vital conversations about other challenges confronting the NATO allies. The large gathering of around 9,000 people, which included 45 heads of state or government and their ministers, had a full agenda. A primary topic was the war between Russia and Ukraine. NATO nations reaffirmed their support for Ukraine. Discussions focused on how to continue providing aid, though some observers noted a slight shift in focus compared to previous summits. Ukraine's president was invited to certain events, but did not participate in all the main leader-level meetings. Another point of discussion was China. Due to the growing influence of China as a concern for some members, and leaders addressed this, particularly regarding China's support for Russia. For many European nations, however, China was not the central focus of their talks. New types of threats were also on the agenda. This included online attacks, known as cybersecurity. They also discussed hybrid warfare, which involves a combination of different methods to attack a country, not just military force. Emerging technologies, like special computer programs and things used in space, were also identified as threats that NATO must prepare for. The relationship between the United States and Europe was another key theme. The U.S. president's firm stance on NATO was a central element of the conversations. Some European leaders expressed worry about the future commitment of the U.S. to the alliance. There were differing views within Europe itself. Eastern European countries, for instance, often feel a strong need for NATO because they are worried about Russia. Other nations, like France or Germany, also talked about how Europe could do more for its own defense. But ultimately, most leaders agreed that maintaining NATO's unity is very important for peace and safety. Outside the meeting halls, public voices were also present. Public forums were held, allowing experts and citizens to debate NATO-related topics. Also, there were protests near the summit venue. People came to show they were against war and against spending so much money on armies and weapons. These public voices were also a part of the event. The NATO summit officially commenced in The Hague. On the first day, June 24th, distinguished guests began to arrive. The King of the Netherlands and the Dutch Prime Minister formally welcomed all the participants. There was a big welcome party. That evening, the King hosted a dinner at his residence for many of the leaders, a time for friendly talks. On the second day, June 25th, the main business of the summit got underway. Leaders and ministers participated in numerous meetings, convening in working groups, as well as in one-on-one sessions. The goal was to agree on the final message of the summit. A major discussion was about money for defense. The countries talked a lot about how much each should spend. In the end, they agreed on a new plan. They decided to spend a higher amount of money on defense in the next 10 years. The target is now around 5% of their country's economic size. An important part of the final paper was about Article 5. This is the promise that an attack on one country is an attack on all. The leaders said this promise is still very strong. It means they will help each other if one is attacked. The countries also talked about big global issues. They spoke about the war in Ukraine. They showed support for Ukraine. But they did not make big new plans for military help there. They also mentioned China as a concern, like in past meetings. But it was not the main topic. After the meetings, the U.S. president spoke to the press. He said the agreement on spending was a good result for the United States. He also said he talked to other leaders about different matters. He noted that Ukraine's president was at the dinner, but not the main leader meetings. Other leaders also spoke. Some said the new money plans would make NATO stronger. The president of Poland talked about his country already spending a lot on defense. The summit finished with the countries agreeing on these points in their official paper. It was a busy 2 days with many important decisions. This meeting in The Hague was very important for NATO. It was special for a few reasons. First, it was the first time the leaders of NATO countries met in the Netherlands since 1949, a very long time ago. Second, it was the first NATO summit with the American president back in office for his second term. These two facts made the meeting historically significant. The summit had a big job to look at how NATO countries share the work and the costs of defense. The decisions made here could change NATO for the future, especially on how much money each country spends on its military. We saw the effects of the summit soon after it finished. Many countries that are part of NATO quickly announced that they would increase their spending on defense. Countries like Germany, Norway, and the United Kingdom shared their plans for bigger military budgets. Experts believe that because of these promises, the money spent on defense by European NATO members will grow a lot. It's maybe around 18% in the next few years until 2030. People outside NATO also noticed. Russia, for example, reacted with negative and angry words about what happened at the summit. This shows that Russia pays close attention to NATO's actions and how united its members are. Inside the NATO countries, the summit caused discussions in politics. Some politicians and people supported the decisions. They said the leaders did well to agree on spending more money because it makes the alliance stronger and safer. But other politicians and people were not happy. They said their leaders should not have agreed to spend so much, especially because the American president strongly asked for it. This created debates in many countries, even though the leaders strongly said that Article 5, which means everyone, helps if one is attacked, is very solid. Some experts still had worries. They thought maybe the American president might not always follow through on that promise fully in the future. The summit showed that NATO is actively working on current problems. It showed that the countries still believe it is important to protect each other together. They are ready to spend a lot of money to do this. However, the meeting also showed that it is not always easy for all 32 countries to agree on everything. Sometimes leaders have different ideas or money is hard to find at home. This meeting in The Hague was a special moment that could help shape NATO's path for years ahead. The end of the summit, the NATO summit in The Hague came to an end. After days of talks and meetings, leaders from all 32 member countries departed. This event, hosted by the Netherlands, held significant meaning for safety around the world and for the future steps of the NATO alliance. The summit clearly demonstrated that NATO is still active and important in today's world. Member countries strongly believe in the idea of collective defense, where an attack on one is seen as an attack on all. This core principle, known as Article 5, was firmly restated during the summit, offering reassurance to allies. A key achievement was the agreement on a new framework for defense spending. Countries pledged to increase their military budgets significantly. This commitment to invest more money in defense capabilities is considered one of the most substantial decisions made by the alliance in a generation. It signaled a serious intent to be better prepared for current and future threats. However, the summit also highlighted the ongoing challenges of keeping unity within the alliance. With 32 members, each with its own national interests and political pressures, finding full agreement is complex. The debates over defense spending were particularly difficult for some countries. The direct communication style of the U.S. president also added a layer of tension to the discussions. Financial concerns in several European nations presented difficulties in meeting the high spending targets proposed. Despite these challenges, the Netherlands served as a capable host, providing a platform for these crucial discussions. Public and political reactions to the summit were varied. Supporters viewed the increased spending commitments as a necessary step to strengthen deterrence and security. They argued that facing threats requires greater investment. Critics, however, raised concerns about the financial burden on national economies and questioned whether a focus purely on military spending was the best approach for global peace. Some worried it might lead to more tension instead of less. Many questions remained for the future. Will all member states follow through completely on their spending promises? Can the alliance maintain a united front against external pressures and internal disagreements? The long-term consequences of the decisions made at this summit are yet to fully unfold. It could mark a significant turning point for NATO, reshaping how allies share responsibilities and face the world together. It underlined that even important meetings involve compromises and leave some issues unresolved. What do you believe will be the most significant outcome of this NATO summit in the coming years? Hey there, before you click away, if you learned something new today, please take a moment to leave a like. Share your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe to the channel. It's quick, and your support genuinely helps us create more great English learning videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us to the end of the story. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Have a wonderful day, take care, and we'll see you in the next one.